I'll introduce you now to Jonathan Taylor, who's the head of what I think is still Britain's largest state boarding school. Might be some challenges somewhere. Okay, Jonathan.
Thank you, Colin, and we will still claim that mantle of being the largest state boarding school, in terms of boarding numbers at least, certainly for the moment. And it's great to see so many colleagues here from local authorities, but also partner member schools of the Boarding Schools Association. And I will touch a little bit later about how boarding schools work together to offer the very best we can for the young people that we serve. And in a sense, the question how boarding schools can help local authorities isn't really what I'm going to focus the majority of the next 15 minutes or so on. In a sense, I think that answer can be given quite readily and quite easily, in that we have great expertise and we want to work in partnership. But what I really want to do in the next 15 minutes is just to explore, particularly for local authority colleagues, boarding, what my boarding school particularly looks like, as a flavour of one example of what's already been stated this morning. It's a multitude of different opportunities, different offers across the boarding school sector. And my answer to the question earlier is really my starting point. It's about the moral purpose of what we do. Wyndham College, together with a whole host of other schools up and down the country, we do want to support vulnerable young people and we want to improve their life chances. We were Ofsteded by Ofsted Social Care in 2017, and that quote there was one of the proudest things in our Ofsted report, that vulnerable children at Wyndham College make rapid and sustained progress from their starting points. Now, you've heard that from the Norfolk study. Ofsted, or in the independent sector, the Independent School Inspectorate, will frequently comment about the difference that boarding schools make to young people, and I think that's fundamentally important. A bit of context about Wyndham College. We're a state boarding school, proud to be a state boarding school, proud, Colin, to claim that we're the largest state boarding school, but we're also proud to be a member of the Boarding School Association, and that is an umbrella organisation that includes independent and state boarding schools. Around about 40 state boarding schools up and down the country. I've worked in a very small state boarding school back in my career that had 80 boarders. At Wyndham College we've got 630. So you can imagine that keeps us all, me particularly, very busy. We're a non-selective school and we are a state comprehensive school. Half of our community are day students, in the same way as it would be in any comprehensive school. The other half choose, for a variety of reasons, to board with us. We've also, as is the want in the world of state education, we've founded a multi-academy trust. And at the moment we are responsible for about 3,500 students in our trust, 8 primary schools and 4 secondary schools, and that is very much to the benefit of students at Wyndham College. We also, this is a bit of an advanced plug, we also have a primary free school in pre-opening stage, and that will have a boarding element aimed at year 5 and year 6. I think one of the outcomes, obviously the research that we've looked at this morning, is the longer that we have young people in our boarding environments, perhaps the most sustained the impact is. And certainly opening up in our part of the world the first primary boarding provision, 15 places for year 5 and 15 for year 6, we think is very significant, and we're certainly looking to work with a range of partners with a focus on supporting vulnerable children in that context as well. We have a number of key boarding partners. We've heard today from our colleagues at Norfolk Local Authority, but we work very closely with the Ministry of Defence, with Springboard, Royal National Children's Foundation, or under their common umbrella now, Royal Springboard, I understand, Ian. We work with Buttle UK, and altogether about 30 different charities, working with our young people in lots of different ways and lots of different needs to support their places in boarding. And I will talk a little bit later to social care colleagues particularly that we are a very regulated sector. State boarding schools are not only visited by Ofsted fairly frequently in terms of our educational outcomes, but we have separate social care Ofsted visits that are statutory every 3 years, in the same way colleagues in the independent sector are visited by the ISI. And those reports really should give you some security and some confidence about the quality of boarding in the United Kingdom, because there is no doubt, as Lord Agnew said earlier, the days of, he was remembering 45 years ago, I can remember my boarding experience 25 years ago. It is very, very different nowadays. So in terms of Wyndham College, children and young people's holistic health needs are well met, able to access extensive extracurricular activities that provide a suitable balance between studies and downtime. And I think every boarding school that I visited and staff that I speak to, they might use different vocabulary, but actually the intent is to provide a home away from home, a secure learning environment where students can progress academically, but also an environment where they can flourish personally. And a culture of high expectation and high attainment. I've worked half of my career in state boarding. I'm a passionate believer in the importance of state boarding, and we punch above our weight. State boarding schools really punch above our weight in terms of the outcomes that young people achieve. At Wyndham College we do have robust systems in place that monitor vulnerable students, and as Ofsted said, to repeat that, it's about rapid and sustained progress in all its different forms. A little bit about Wyndham College. Obviously 630 boarders is a different operation to the state boarding school I worked in Lincolnshire, which had one boarding house with 80 students. But at Wyndham we have 5 main boarding houses aged from 11 to 16, and then a separate sixth form boarding house. We understand, I might be challenged on this, but we understand that's the largest boarding house in Europe, our sixth form boarding house, with about 240 boarders. We try to mix our day and boarding students, so all of our day students also belong to a boarding house, and we intend from about 8:15 in the morning through to 5:15, 5:30 in the evening to be very little distinction between our day students and our boarders, so that actually our boarders are getting that social mix, but also crucially our day students in quite a rural part of Norfolk that would lack diversity without access to our boarding environment. Actually our day students are phenomenally enriched by the boarding community. And we have mixed gender and mixed age boarding houses. Now, many schools won't. I understand that the college was the very first back in 1971 to introduce mixed gender boarding houses. They work well for us. They may not work well for all young people, and certainly when you're looking at that matching that's come across as being very important, you know, that is a consideration. Mixed environment, a single sex environment. And as a colleague said earlier, there is such diversity within the boarding sector that you should be able to find a suitable match around a whole series of different contextual factors. Stability, Lord Agnew mentioned earlier, and I passionately talk about, particularly for vulnerable students, that the stability of a boarding day and the stability of a boarding school experience set against the example that was talked about earlier, 16 different schools being passed, perhaps from foster placement to foster placement. What vulnerable students at boarding schools such as my own get is a very, very structured environment. And that's a typical day. You can see it begins early. It's kind of the 8:30 to 3:45 would be a very similar experience to a standard high quality state school. But then we break into what we call our Wyndham Life programme, which is our range of extracurricular activities. Between 4 and 5:15, it's open to everyone. It's open to our day students as well as to our boarding students. But then in the evening, there'll be supervised private study or prep. We've put an hour there. I'd be expecting Year 11 certainly to be doing more than an hour, but it is kind of under supervised provision. And then obviously depending on the age of the students, potentially into a second raft of extracurricular activities. And living that and overseeing that, it is a full-on experience, but it is actually a very enriching and ultimately life-transforming experience for the right young person. We run typically 65 different extracurricular activities in a week, whole series of things. We've got a cadets unit that is very popular and of increasing popularity. From Duke of Edinburgh, a whole range of different sporting activities. Musical life of the college is very, very strong. Again, reiterate the example of the young person earlier, learning the flute was actually for her a real life-transforming opportunity, drama, debating, all of the things that you might typically associate with strong boarding schools in the independent sector, we certainly replicate at the college. All boarding schools that belong to the Boarding School Association have signed up to the Commitment to Care Charter, and that's a very important piece of work around common values and a common philosophy around safeguarding the young people that we work with. And again, Ofsted, in their inspections of us, and it's replicated with the ISI, will look in great detail at our safeguarding arrangements. And certainly in 2017, our social care team talked about our approach being exceptional and particularly innovative. And I think the bottom sentence there is quite an important one about the robustness of our procedures in following up any concerns about young people. We look at our boarding houses, and care that we provide is central to what we do. At the college, we have qualified heads of house who are experienced residential practitioners. They're all in our school, they're all senior members of teaching staff. We have house parents who are also teachers that are residential. We have resident fellows who, I guess in old parlance, may have been gap year students, but we now tend to talk about them as graduate interns who will come and work for a 12-month period, supporting boarding, but also supporting kind of enrichment. And many of those will go on to have careers in either social care or increasingly in teaching, and we would view that as a commitment to young people as well. And then other house staff, we still use the title matron, and we have boarding house managers as well. I think as I was reflecting on the presentation from my colleagues from Norfolk this morning, it made me realise that our involvement with Norfolk, but also with other similar partners, it's really improved our school, and it's really improved the quality of care that we provide for all 1,350 young people that we're privileged to serve. There are many things in place now that weren't in place 10 years ago. And I'm sure that actually the sharpened focus and closer work with social care colleagues has improved and forced us to reflect on the work that we do. But just to give you a snapshot, we have a 24-hour medical centre on site. We have a regular GP service who served from the college. We have our own wellbeing manager who's got a responsibility not only for student wellbeing but also staff wellbeing. We've employed 2 now mental health practitioners. One is a fully qualified mental health nurse. We've got staff trained in emotional literacy and support, and we run all sorts of in-house counselling services for staff and students, and 45 of our staff have now gone through training from Mind around kind of wellbeing work. I actually think without our involvement with Springboard, RMCF, Buttle and Norfolk, I don't think those services would be as enhanced as they are. So I think that's kind of an unintended consequence, perhaps, of the benefits of this type of work. And Ofsted talked about our innovative approaches to welfare, and many of these things will be seen in other schools as well in different forms. We have what we call a team around the child process, which we've learned directly from our social care colleagues in terms of getting key staff fairly regularly to discuss individual students. We've got a student wellbeing ambassador programme, and the one I really like, it's really popular, is the Pets for Therapy, which is in kind of its early stages. But I think you'll find that boarding schools are very, very open to lots of different ways in which young people can be supported. So why do I think local authorities should consider boarding schools? Well, first and foremost, we've got a really strong track record of success. We know what we do. We frequently do it extremely well. We're not complacent. As a sector, we're constantly looking to innovate and to learn from each other. We're very collaborative in the work that we do with each other. We have great expertise. And we've got a real wide-ranging experience that we offer our young people. I've talked about structure, but we also offer ambition. Real ambition. It was quite interesting this morning. Absolutely true. I was due 6:18 train out of Diss. It was cancelled. Well, it wasn't. It was going to abandon me in Colchester because Liverpool Street was closed for trains from Norwich. So I drove to Cambridge in order to get here. And the train was crammed, and I was stood next to somebody from my boarding school. I hadn't seen him for 25 years. I didn't recognise him. he recognised me, and he said, I know you work in education, what are your school's results like? And I trailed off a whole load of statistics, and he said, no, that's not really what I'm interested in. What I'm really interested in, what are your young people like? What do they turn out to be? And that was a really engaging narrative, and I think there's so much truth in that. And Lord Ague's not here, is he? So I can kind of get away with saying it. Perhaps in the state sector, there is an obsession at times with league tables. Where we're obsessed as a state boarding school is with young people and how they turn out and their confidence and their resilience and the skills that they're able to exhibit. I think the other important factor that I've touched on is in terms of confidence. We are very, very regulated as a sector. Lovely photos there of you of children doing all kinds of things, but this is a lived reality, and I think again when we're going back to the establishing relationships with Norfolk through this scheme, I think social care colleagues' understanding of boarding was only really ever developed when they came into the school and came and looked around the boarding houses and had the opportunity to talk to our young people and eat a meal with them. It's fine to read a brochure or a website, but actually until you engage with the young people that are in boarding, I don't think you'll get a real sense of understanding of the great work that we do. And what really interested me in truth about the Norfolk research, it wasn't the first lot, it's this that's been published this morning, because that's the attitudinal work and that is the voice of the young people that we're working with. We're very successful. Academically, we're very successsul as a school. We've got a strong track record of it's the right destination for young people of kind of university entrance and higher level apprenticeships. But that, crucially for us, includes students from all sorts of quite vulnerable and difficult backgrounds. We won a Pupil Premium Award from the Department for Education in 2016, and we have all sorts of accolades that I don't intend to run through. What they do show to you is that Wyndham College, as an example of a boarding school, is very diverse. We offer a wide range of opportunities, and the things that you will find on a visit to Wyndham College, I know through personal experience, are replicated in other boarding schools up and down the country. So, to really answer the question, how can boarding schools assist? We've got real expertise, we've got knowledge, we've got honesty. What we ask for colleagues from local authorities is to share their expertise with us as well, so there is a general partnership. And when we're looking to the possibility of placing a young person, we need to know about them, we need to know about the issues, so that we can plan to see firstly whether we can meet the needs, and secondly, if we feel we can, to make sure that the wraparound care services are in place. And I think crucially that understanding has developed significantly over the past 10 years. So expertise, partnership, passion, ambition. Boarding schools, state boarding, I am biased towards, but I know independent colleagues do it incredibly well. You know, we do want to work with young people. We do think that we can transform life chances. But I'll end with the note that Lord Agnew said earlier. It isn't for every child. It is about having boarding as one option in a wide range of different approaches that you can take to helping support your vulnerable young people. For the right child, boarding will change their lives and it will change it positively. And there are a whole series of head teachers in the room that I'm sure will be delighted to talk over lunch or afterwards with colleagues from local authorities. It gives me the greatest pleasure to hand straight over to Ian Davenport. Ian has worked with Wyndham College over very many years as well as one of our core partners. Ian.